I am about to enter a massive fantasy football tournament over on Underdog Fantasy that has nearly a $2 million prize pool, but there's a catch. I can only draft 4 players on this team. The other 14 players have to be selected by your favorite fantasy football content creators from around the industry, and I have no say in who they are going to select. So without wasting any more time, let's just hop right into today's video and let's start drafting this team. As this draft is starting, you guys see we landed the 101, which is great because I am going to be making the first round pick for this roster. And there's one player who I think gives us a significant positional advantage based on the production that he gave us last year. So I want to go Christian McCaffrey with this draft pick. I mean, you look at what he was able to do with San Francisco last year, 272 carries for 1,459 receiving yards. He also had 67 receptions for 564 in the air, 21 touchdowns, absolute baller of a year from Christian McCaffrey. 24.5 fantasy points per game, number 1 in the NFL, absolute dominant fantasy football asset. And like I said, I think he gives us a massive positional advantage, kind of similar to how we've seen Travis Kelce be over the last couple of years. While people are fading Christian McCaffrey, while people are fading running backs in general in fantasy football, Christian McCaffrey is putting up elite numbers. So those that can get their hands on Christian McCaffrey, I strongly suggest doing so. He is a dominant fantasy football asset, and he's going to be the number 1 pick on our roster. But now that we've selected Christian McCaffrey, we have a very long turn until our next pick, where we will be making selections at the 212 and the 301. And like I said, those picks are not going to be selections from me. They will be from other people. So let's get around this turn. Let's see what's going to happen, and then we'll kind of recap where we're at. So some time has passed. You guys see we've got around the turn here. We had the typical wide receiver run in the first round: CeeDee Lambs, Jamar, Amon-Ra, Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, Puka Nacua, all of these elite wide receivers going in the first round. We also had some running backs like Breece Hall, Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs. And then in the second round, we kind of had a couple more of those running backs come off the board. And then we also had Josh Allen come off the board here at the 211. So this is going to leave us a selection here where we have a lot of options we could go. I think mostly I would suggest that we go with that wide receiver. There's guys on the board like Olave, Stephon Diggs, Deebo Samuel, Malik Neighbors, Mike Evans, Cooper Kupp. Lots of guys still available at the wide receiver position. But if we also wanted to go maybe get a positional advantage, maybe we'd have to reach a little bit, but we do have that long term, so I'm okay with the reach. Go get a guy like Travis Kelce or something. So there's a lot of options that we can do. But like I mentioned, I'm not going to be making this selection. This selection is going to be made by my guy, Sal. So let's see what Sal has to say.
Yeah, so Chris Olave, our second round pick, he's entering year 3 of his career, the prime of his career, his second year with Derek Carr, who he averaged 9 targets per game or so last year with, and now has no new added competition, and it'll be his first year with new offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak. Now, Kubiak's going to bring over the West Coast offense. That means a lot of running the ball, spacing out the field, and also play action passing, efficiency in the red zone. These are all new things for a Saints offense. Now, the Saints ranked top 10 in passing last year, so there's a decent chance they're going to throw less this season, which could impact Chris Olave, but he has no competition. It's like Rashid Shaheed, A.T. Perry, Cedric Wilson, so he should push towards maybe a 30% target share, meaning for a second straight year, he should earn 130 or so targets. And that makes him a completely fine pick, assuming he stays healthy in the second round of this draft right here, so let's crush the rest of this one.
There you go. So Sal selects Chris Olave. I like the pick. I don't hate it at all. I think some of the best picks on the board would have been Olave, Deebo Samuel, probably even Mike Evans. These guys are elite contributors at the wide receiver position, and we're hoping that Chris Olave takes that step forward here this year and finally gives us some wide receiver 1 production. So I like the pick for you, Sal. Let's see who is going to be selecting our third round pick here at the 301. This is going to be my guy Jordan Richards over at Destination Devi. So let's see who he selects for us here.
What's going on, guys? Jay Rich here from Destination Devi, and at the 301, I'm gonna have to go with my boy Tampa Bay Bucks wide receiver Mike Evans. There's a lot of wide receiver 2s on the board, and Evans is one of the true ones. There's also plenty of stacking opportunities with Christian McCaffrey and Chris Olave already on the lineup. Top 10 in receiving yards and touchdowns. Clearly has a rapport with Baker Mayfield. Love the upside for Evans and love that he can go off any given week. At the 301, I got to take Mike Evans.
Let's go, baby. We get Mike Evans. Mike Evans, another dominant wide receiver 1 for fantasy football. So I love the picks here. We get 2 elite wide receivers for our team just to pair them with Christian McCaffrey. Feels like we got a good little base here. So we got a long turn again. I think there's going to be a couple guys that come off the board that we want. But as we get into these next rounds, I think the idea is going to be to keep loading up the wide receiver position. If we keep doing that, we'll probably be going with a hero running back build unless we get a value for a guy that falls. And if we take another running back, who knows what's going to happen here in the next round. And so as we get around this turn, you see guys coming off the board that we talked about in the last round: Deebo Samuel, Cooper Kupp, DJ Moore, Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta. We also had some of the top quarterbacks come off the board. So we had Jalen Hurts go at the 307, Lamar Jackson at the 312, Pat Mahomes at the 48, CJ Stroud at the 410. And so not a lot of running backs off the board now after that early run: Jacobs, Etienne, Pacheco. But that takes us all the way over to our 412. So we're sitting here on the clock, but let's see what we could possibly do here. I think, like I mentioned before, loading up on the wide receiver at this point, don't feel like we should really be reaching on one of these running backs. It doesn't feel like a lot of these guys are difference makers. I think we could still go with that hero running back build. Now, in this tier specifically, I think there's some real difference makers at the tight end position. We could possibly go with a guy like Dalton Kincaid. Maybe they could go with a guy like Mark Andrews. I think both of those guys have elite upside at the tight end position, and they're some of my favorite picks at the tight end position this year. If you do stick at the wide receiver, Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, T. Higgins, Christian Kirk, or maybe one of these guys try and surprise us and they try and take a difference maker at the quarterback position. Anthony Richardson is still on the board, depending on how you feel about him. But here at the 412, we are going to have Dave Kluge from the Football Guys make this selection. So let's see who he picks for us.
Getting T. Higgins at the 4-5 turn in drafts this year has been one of the easiest selections to make. We're talking about a 25-year-old who has already displayed the abilities to be a fantasy stud, posting wide receiver 1 numbers through stretches throughout his career. And I understand last year was rough. You know, we had injuries, we had some games where he just completely disappeared, but that recency bias is making him a great value this offseason. I know Jamar Chase is the wide receiver 1 in Cincinnati, but there's enough in this Cincinnati passing bias supported by Joe Burrow that we can support 2 fantasy relevant wide receivers. And the contingent upside for Higgins, if something were to happen to Jamar Chase, makes him even that much more appealing. If Higgins is on the board when you are on the clock at the 4-5 turn, don't overthink it this year.
All right, so there you have it. Dave has us selecting T. Higgins. I think he has some upside here in this round. So the only thing I would say I dislike about that video is all of the Bears gear in the back. Dave, just messing around. I do like some Caleb Williams, so happy for you guys to get some Caleb Williams. Hopefully we have many years coming forward of good Vikings and Bears matchups, but just giving you some shit for the Bears in the background. But I do like the T. Higgins pick. But that does take us to the 501 here, where Corey Buschlen of Fantasy Stock Exchange is going to be making our selection. So let's see who he grabs, and then we'll take a look at this team.
What's up, fellas? Bush here from Fantasy Stock Exchange, and with the 501, I'm going to select Amari Cooper, wide receiver of the Cleveland Browns, a guy that's been ultra consistent over the last number of years. 5 of his last 6, he's been over 14.5 PPR points per game. Best ball is all about spike weeks, and Amari Cooper is one of the spike week kings to go along with Chris Olave and Mike Evans that we already have built out in this wide receiver core. Top 5 in air yard share, top 5 in targets per route run against man coverage last year. Just give me those big weeks and maybe some untapped upside with Deshaun Watson maybe playing a little bit better than the past couple of years that he's played. Amari Cooper, smash pick here at the top of the 5th round.
All right, so Bush takes Amari Cooper, and that gives us a very stacked wide receiver room to start off this draft. We currently have Christian McCaffrey, Chris Olave, Mike Evans, T. Higgins, Amari Cooper. And so that means that these guys, they passed on the elite tight ends. We're going to get out of that elite tight end category here pretty quickly. So it seems like we're going to be punting those off, which is fine. I do like that Dalton Kincaid. I do like that Mark Andrews pick, but we're going to be going with a deep wide receiver room, and that's not a bad thing in best ball drafts. But as you see here, we get around that long turn again. It is going to have Dalton Kincaid and Mark Andrews, who came off the board right after our selection. You had a little bit of a running back run: Rashad White, Joe Mixon, James Cook, Kenneth Walker, Alvin Kamara, and Aaron Jones all off the board. And then a couple more of these elite quarterbacks: Anthony Richardson, Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow. People keep tacking the wide receiver as well. But that is going to bring us up to the 72nd pick here in this draft, the 612. And the 612, I finally get to make another selection. So right now, like I said, we have Amari Cooper, Mike Evans, T. Higgins, Chris Olave, Christian McCaffrey. But what I think I want to do with this selection is I think I want to add another running back to this roster. So I think a guy that stands out to me on the board right now and who I'm going to be selecting here is going to be David Montgomery. And I get it. A lot of people like Jahmyr Gibbs. And I think because we all love Jahmyr Gibbs, we're kind of fading David Montgomery too much in this Lions offense because they still have one of the best offensive lines in football. this is a team that's going to be very run heavy. We've seen them give goal line running back touches to David Montgomery last year. I mean, he had 13 total touchdowns on the ground. He still ran for 1,000 yards. He was a top 15 running back in fantasy points per game. I think getting him here, plugging him in as our RB2, this is going to be a good RB2 to pair with Christian McCaffrey, and he gives us some safety there at that RB2, and he's going to give us some RB1 numbers on spike weeks where he does get in the end zone, which could be quite often in this Detroit Lions offense. So he is going to be my selection here at the 6-12, and he is going to be the RB2 for us here on this roster. And now here at the 7-1, we don't have the selection, but there's a ton of different ways we could go. You have guys like Jordan Addison, Rome Odunze, Deontay Johnson, Keon Coleman, Brian Thomas, all the upside at the wide receiver position. If you wanted to go take a guy like Ingram or Njoku, you could do that. You want another running back, Najee Harris. But let's see who Mason Dodd from Flock Fantasy is going to select for us here at the 7-01. So Mason, take it away.
We're going to go ahead and take Jordan Addison. I mean, if you look at the tier drop-off that you're going to see at wide receiver in comparison to running back in the coming rounds, really, the running back, you have a ton of values littered throughout. I mean, you have high upside rookies, whereas wide receiver, the cliff's about to get pretty damn ugly. And also with Addison, phenomenal prospect, great year one. Obviously, you're concerned about the situation going into this next season. But typically, we know we want to be betting on talented rookie wide receivers that succeeded going into their second seasons.
All right, so Jordan Addison, I like the upside pick there. We'll see what he does with J.J. McCarthy this year under center, or maybe even Sam Darnold under center. But the spike, the upside that Mason is talking about, he definitely possesses that. So I definitely like this pick for Mason and for our fantasy football team here, leaving us with the roster right now of Christian McCaffrey, Chris Olave, Mike Evans, T. Higgins, Amari Cooper, David Montgomery, and Jordan Addison. So let's get around this turn, and you'll see the guys like Rome Odunze, Deontay Johnson, those guys that we talked about, they all came off the board. We also had Jordan Love and Caleb Williams and Tua Tagovailoa come off the board, and then a lot of these running backs started to come off the board as well, especially in that 8th round. Mostert, Zamir White, James Conner, Zach Moss, Jaylen Warren, DeAndre Swift, and that takes us all the way over to our 8-12, where there's quite a few places we could go here as well. I think we could maybe use another running back on this roster. If you want to keep adding at that wide receiver position, go for it. But I think we've gotten out of that tight end tier where I don't really want us to reach for a tight end on this roster at this point anymore, because we are now kind of punting the position for the most part. So let's see what we do here at the 8-12. This selection is going to be made by RayGQue over at Destination Devi. So let's see what Ray has for us.
What's poppin'? It's your boy Ray G from Destination Devi, and I'm here up at the 8-12 spot, and it's time to take a quarterback. I want that correlation. I want that Week 17 matchup against the Lions, who should be able to score a lot of points. Sign me up for one of the most surgical quarterbacks in the NFL versus man or zone defense. He's an efficiency god. He's an efficiency monster, and he's got weapons galore. Let's pair up Christian McCaffrey with his quarterback, Brock Purdy, rocking with BP. 8-12, let's get it.
All right, so Ray gets us Brock Purdy. So we have our first quarterback come off the board for our squad. Like you heard, pairing them in the San Francisco offense with Christian McCaffrey, our number 1 overall pick. Can't say I hate it. I think I like that correlation there, and I like Brock Purdy in this type of tier. I think he has a lot of upside. Him and guys like Jared Goff, I think they're a little bit undervalued, but they still have upside, especially in these 1 QB formats. But with that being said, let's see what happens here at the 901, where, again, not my selection, but this is going to be a selection by Garret Price of Dynasty Nerds. So let's see who Garret Price selects for us here.
Hey guys, Garret Price from Dynasty Nerds. And at 901, let's go with the running back, Jonathon Brooks of the Carolina Panthers. Yes, we're taking a rookie at this point. And in the 9th round, there's only a few backs left that offer any real 3-down upside. That's what Jonathon Brooks has. And he wouldn't even be lasting this long if it weren't for the injury. He has that skill set that we're looking for, and he might not get to work early, but late, when maybe there's an injury to a guy that we drafted already, like McCaffrey or David Montgomery, he'll be a guy that'll be able to get us through that end of the season hump.
All right, so there we go. We get another running back on this roster as well, making Jonathon Brooks the RB3 with David Montgomery and Christian McCaffrey. I think this gives us a very solid running back room to start it off, and we're kind of well-rounded right now. We have a couple wide receivers that we believe in. We have some running backs we believe in. We have our quarterback 1. So the only position that we really don't have at this point is the tight end. And like I mentioned, I don't mind if we keep punting that a couple more rounds, maybe get into that Freiermuth tier, but we have this turn here. Let's see what happens as we get around it. And as you you can see, Rashee Rice off the board, a little bit of a faller, obviously due to unforeseen circumstances. You had some quarterbacks like Jaden Daniels, the rushing upside there, Jared Goff, Matthew Stafford. And then we had a couple other guys like Curtis Samuel, who I like taking shots on in best ball drafts. And even on the same team, guys like Khalil Shakur. I like these guys who kind of have ambiguous situations, have the opportunity to be the number one wide receiver in their offense. I like those types of picks. Even guys like Jameson Williams, who went at the 905, but this does take us over to the 10-12, and this is going to be a selection where, like I said, we could maybe take one of those tight ends. You have some tight ends on the board like TJ Hawkinson, Cole Kmet, Pat Freiermuth. But if we don't want to go that direction, you just keep loading up on the wide receiver and the running back. So plenty of options to do it. But let's see what the selection is here at the 10-12. This is going to be made by Brett Kollmann. So Brett, let's see what you got for us.
Hey, Brett Kollmann here. And with the 12th pick in the 10th round, we are going with Austin Ekeler. And I know a lot of people out there might be worried about Ekeler going into this season. I know he's an older running back. He had some injury issues. Usually that's a recipe for disaster, but allow me to try to sway you here. So Austin Ekeler last year, in the first week, he sustained a high ankle sprain, his first high ankle sprain he's ever had in his career. He came back about 6 weeks later against Dallas, injured his other ankle, not to the same degree, but still he was working with 2 ankle injuries all of a sudden. And then he had a stretch of defenses he went against that was absolutely absurd. I'm talking about the Lions, the Jets, the Ravens, the Patriots, the Chiefs, the Bears, in no particular order. That's like 60 to 70% of the top run defenses in the entire league that he all went against back to back to back. So it was kind of a ridiculous season for him last year. And I mean, in a bad way, playing through multiple injuries, playing through the best run defenses in the entire league, all in one stretch in the middle of the season. It was just brutal. I think he's still got some gas in the tank. I think he's still a great player. Obviously, he catches the ball well too. So yeah, I know he's older. I know he had some injuries last year, but if there was ever a time you're going to get value on Austin Ekeler, it's right now.
All right, so we have a little bit of a gamble here from Brett Kollmann, and I can't say that I hate it. At the running back position, I think you have to take shots on guys that can get volume, and Austin Ekeler, we've seen when he gets volume, he has been dominant for fantasy football. It is going to come down to the age. Has Austin Ekeler lost it, or does he still have some juice left in the tank like Brett is saying? I guess that's going to be a question for us moving forward. Some other guys on the board that I think probably have some value at the running back position, Tajay Spears, Blake Corum. Those probably would have been some guys that I was looking at too if we went the running back position. But hey, Brett, I respect it. I love the pick. Let's see what happens with Austin Ekeler. If he can give us anything even remotely close to some of the stuff that he gave us in Los Angeles, this could be a hell of a value pick. So I like the swing here from Brett Kollmann. But now we have the 1101, and the 1101 is a selection that I get to make. So we are back on the clock here at the 1101. And now that we've went with another running back, I feel like we have 4 of them that we can kind of rely on. You have Christian McCaffrey, David Montgomery, Jonathan Brooks, Austin Ekeler. I don't feel like we need to go for our QB2 yet. And yes, we do still have some tight ends on the board like TJ Hawkinson, Pat Freiermuth, but maybe we can get one of those guys in the upcoming rounds. We're going to have to trust the guys picking. Hopefully they'll take one for us, but I am going to gamble. I'm going to pass on the tight end here as well. So let's go to the wide receiver well. There's a couple guys on the board. Josh Downs, Adonai Mitchell, Joshua Palmer, Jacoby Myers, Jerry Jeudy. None of these guys have the upside that Adonai Mitchell has in fantasy football. And you look at what he was able to do at Texas. I think this is a guy who in 2023, he had 55 receptions, 845 yards, and 11 touchdowns. He profiles as one of these more dominant X outside type of wide receivers. And I love Adonai Mitchell in this offense here in Indianapolis, where he's not going to have to be Superman or Batman right away. He's going to get to play Robin to Michael Pittman Jr. So I like this. I think it's an upside swing. There's not a lot of players on the board right now that have the upside that Adonai Mitchell has. So I am going to take a rookie wide receiver. Let's see how it pans out. And hopefully this Indianapolis Colts offense is high scoring this year under Shane Steichen with Anthony Richardson back at quarterback. And let's see what Adonai Mitchell can do for the Indianapolis Colts and for this fantasy football team. So getting around this turn here, you guys see the gamble didn't necessarily pay off. All of those tight ends that I mentioned, TJ Hawkinson, Cole Kmet, Pat Freiermuth, all of them went. So we are now probably going to have to continue punting that tight end position. But we did have some running backs that I mentioned as well. Corum, Brian Robinson, Tajay Spears, all these guys off the board. But it does seem like right now is where we are going to be in that take your shot type of territory. So whoever is picking is going to take their guy we probably need to be swinging for upside with all of these picks. But that takes us all the way over to the 12-12, where let's see what the selection is going to be. This selection is going to be coming in from Matthew Betz of the Fantasy Footballers. So let's see what Matthew Betz does here in the 12th round.
What's going on, everybody? This is Matthew Betz, host of the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast, as well as the Dynasty Podcast. And for the 12th round of this draft, we're going to add to our running back room. We're going to go with MarShawn Lloyd, running back out of USC, the rookie for the Green Bay Packers. And when you think about this range of the draft, the wide receiver talent really has dried up. There's not any elite tight ends left on the board. So I think at this point, you look at a running back position where these guys, if something breaks right in terms of injury in front of them or the starter does not play well, they can be a massive boost in best ball formats. When you look at MarShawn Lloyd, this is a spot where he goes to with Green Bay, where Matt LaFleur has always wanted to use two backs. We saw it for years with A.J. Dillon. We saw it back in 2018 when he gave Dion Lewis 14 opportunities per game with a healthy Derrick Henry on the roster. So I think MarShawn Lloyd has value right away out of the gate. But, of course, if anything should happen to Josh Jacobs, who was one of the most inefficient running backs in football last year, MarShawn Lloyd would project as a top 10 running back play every single week. In this format, all we care about is upside. Let's add MarShawn Lloyd.
All right, so speaking of that upside, Matthew Betz takes an upside swing, and I don't mind the MarShawn Lloyd pick because coming into this year's draft class, MarShawn Lloyd was my RB4 in my dynasty rankings, so I do like MarShawn Lloyd. Little bit of a crowded situation here in Green Bay, but like he said, A.J. Dillon hasn't been up to par for the Green Bay Packers for the last couple of years. This definitely feels like his replacement, and just like Matt said, if anything ever happens to Josh Jacobs, this could be a home run type of swing, but this gives us a running back room now where I feel like we're getting a little bit deep. You get guys like Jonathon Brooks, guys like Austin Ekeler, MarShawn Lloyd, Christian McCaffrey, David Montgomery. I don't know if we need to keep hammering the running back position. You heard Mason a couple rounds ago. He said the wide receiver tier does fall off pretty rapidly. So I probably would like to see us add at least one more to this roster for me to feel comfortable with it. But let's see what happens here at the 13-1. This 13-1 is going to be made by my guy Adam over at South Harmon Fantasy and my guy over at BDGE. So let's see what Adam does here.
All right, so we're up here in the 13th round. When I'm taking a look at the team, Brock Purdy at quarterback, I would definitely like to add another QB to this room. However, at this point with the quarterbacks left in the field, I think we're kind of reaching if we take one at this point. Then at tight end, as much as we would like to address the tight end position, I don't think there's anyone on the board that warrants drafting right now. And basically, if I don't get a tight end in underdog drafts that I feel much more secure in and week out towards the top of the drafts, I like to just basically draft 2 or 3 of them at the end. So with that being said, the wide receiver group overall I feel like is a great stable for this team. And I have a lot of dynasty best ball teams, and in best ball in particular, I'm looking to have a combination of guys with a safe floor as well as some that don't necessarily have a safe floor but do have that boom potential. So at South Harmon, we have a sheet which we call the spike week and consistency week chart. This is really good for best ball. The way this chart works and what we're really looking for is what the player's floor is as well as what their ceiling output could offer. There was at the running back position a total of 8 running backs which had 4 or more spike weeks. Now a spike week for the running back is defined as a top 5 finish. 2 of those running backs were Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert, who are running backs for the Miami Dolphins. Obviously, both of them have been drafted at this point, but the way this offense is run, and when I take a look at Achane missing time in the past, Mostert missing time in the past, and Jaylen Wright having a lot of the traits which fit this Miami offense and having tons of speed out of that backfield, this is a guy that may not have a safe floor as far as the opportunity goes, but if he finds himself in a situation where he's given even the 1B in this offense, I think he has an opportunity to really help this running back room out. And so that's why with this pick, it's going to be Jaylen Wright for us.
All right, so if we're going to swing, we're going to swing for the fences. Jaylen Wright is definitely one of those picks. Definitely don't mind that pick. I think if you're going to make that selection, that is definitely one of the higher upside picks that we could do. Now, I do think that there was still a couple tight ends on the board. He says punt it, if you don't get one of the guys, I like that. And I think that's probably still a good plan, but maybe I am just a little bit higher on Ben Sinnott than he is right now. I think Ben Sinnott is a awesome tight end prospect, and maybe he's a little bit of a reach here as well, but I don't know. I think he could possibly have been a pick, but Jaylen Wright, I'm not going to knock the pick. The pick is great. There's a lot of great data that Adam gave us, so lots of good things there. You could have also went with like a Zach Charbonnet or something like that. Kendre Miller if you still want to swing that upside, but Jaylen Wright, Love the pick. We're really punting tight end here, boys, aren't we? And you see, as we go around the turn there, Luke Musgrave, Ben Sinnott, Juwan Johnson, tight ends off the board. So we are in punt territory for sure. Another guy that I like down here that I am taking in a lot of underdog drafts, Troy Franklin. He went there at the 13-11. I think he really has an opportunity to be a great fantasy football producer in this Denver Broncos offense. You have the connection with Bo Nix there in Denver, and I just was a big fan of Troy Franklin in the pre-draft process. I think he went undervalued in the NFL draft, and I'm still a big proponent of Troy Franklin, especially when we're getting him later here in these drafts. So I would have liked to see him fall. Maybe we would have had a chance to pick him later in this draft, but that does take us over here to the 14-12, where we need to make another selection, and this selection is not my pick. It is going to be Nick Ercolano from BDGE. So let's see the big dog himself. Let's see who he picks.
I'm not going to spend time talking about how disrespectful it is that Andrew threw me into the 14-12 spot, just made sure that I didn't have an important pick in this draft, but this is where champions are made, okay? I'm sitting here at the 14-12. I see we don't have a tight end. I'm thinking I've already been disrespected enough. I'm not going to be the first schlub on this team to draft a tight end. But we did need a QB2, okay? And Brock Purdy, while he might be a fine one-quarterback streamer in regular fantasy leagues, we need to stack some quality depth behind him. And Deshaun Watson maybe doesn't fit that build. So that was not a great explanation for why I took him. But we do have Amari Cooper, and we're always trying to stack in best ball. We have his top receiver, Coop, who just went for a career year. We've got Deshaun Watson, hopefully healthy, hopefully back. Hopefully we see some resemblance of the 2019-2020 Deshaun Watson here. But as a QB2, especially in best ball, where I don't trust his arm, but he's still going to use his legs, all right? He still will have games where he rips off 20, 30, 40 yards on the ground, any touchdown. And those are the kind of spike weeks you are looking for in best ball. So Deshaun Watson, we got our QB2. We can get a QB3 later, 18th, 19th round if we want to. I'll leave it to somebody else to grab the tight end.
All right, Nick. I get it. He feels disrespected because he's a little bit later in the draft, but I didn't tell the man to take a vacation and be one of the last people to join this, so it is what it is. There's two sides to the coin, Nick, and I see you not wanting to take a tight end out of spite. I get it. It's fine, but I do like the Deshaun Watson pick. The Deshaun Watson pick, it feels good. He's a good QB2. You get the Amari Cooper stack, and because you didn't want to be the schlub to take the tight end, that's fine. I'm up on the board here at the 15-1, so I'll be the schlub to take the tight end since nobody else wants to take a tight end. So looking at this position, there's not a lot of great names on the board. I mean, you got guys like Hunter Henry, Cade Otton, Isaiah Likely, Chig Okonkwo, Tyler Conklin. Not a lot that I like, but I do think that there's one guy where if we needed somebody to possibly have a chance to score touchdowns for us this year, which when we are in a best ball format, really getting these late round tight ends, you just want guys who can get in the end zone. I feel like Hunter Henry's the guy. So you look at what he was able to do last year, nothing fantastic, 42 receptions, 400 yards, 6 touchdowns. He was the tight end 15 from a fantasy points per game standpoint, so he did average 8.6 there, and there was a couple weeks there where he was getting into the end zone quite often, especially week 14. He had a double end zone game, so I don't know. There's definitely not a lot to love about a pick like Hunter Henry. It feels gross, but if nobody's going to take the tight end, I got to do this for the betterment of this roster. I got to take the tight end, even though it's not sexy. Hunter Henry, he'll be my pick here at the 15-1. So now we have our tight end off the board, and it's good that we did that because you see after Hunter Henry in the 15th round, Cade Otton went, Likely, Conklin, Okonkwo, Fant, Gesicki, all of these guys come off the board. And then we also had a big round of quarterbacks. You had guys like Bryce Young, Daniel Jones, JJ McCarthy, Justin Fields, Geno Smith, all of them off the board. So that makes me feel very good about those picks that we had in the 14th and 15th round. Watson, Henry, we get those guys. We kind of dodged that big run that happened later in this round. And now that takes us here to the 16th round, where at the 16-12, we probably need to keep adding tight ends. Hopefully these guys are willing to keep adding tight ends. I know it's not fun to draft tight ends, but we need a few of them. So let's see if we can get one or two. And at the 16-12, we do have Kevin Coleman from Devi Royale. So let's see who Kevin selects here.
What is up, everybody? This is Kevin Coleman with the Devi Royale. With sitting at the 16th round, looking at who I was going to draft based on our roster, I grabbed our tight end too, Greg Dulcich. Now, Dulcich was one of those guys last year that was talking about being a potential big breakout in Sean Payton's offense. I love to highlight tight ends. Just didn't happen because of a hamstring. But with Jerry Jeudy moving on, with Courtland Sutton possibly moving on, there's some rumors out there that he could be traded. With no surefire wide receiver 2 on this roster, Dulcich could take that role. When you look at him in a very small sample size, 12.1 yards per catch, has the ability to be a big play guy, and we saw that in college. So grabbing Dulcich here in the 16th round is all about upside play that could possibly have some boom weeks for us.
All right. I don't mind that at all. Greg Dulcich is a player who I've talked about a little bit highly on this channel. I think he has some upside in this offense. And we talked about with Troy Franklin when we were talking about him in the 13th round. There's not a lot here in Denver that has been established. So Greg Dulcich, maybe he's one of those guys. He has that athletic profile. I definitely don't mind taking Greg Dulcich as the tight end too. The only issue, and I don't know if Kevin caught this, but Hunter Henry and Greg Dulcich, they do both have the same bye week, week 14. So that is going to be an issue unless we get a third guy. So hopefully one of these last couple picks, one of those guys will take another tight end for us, which I do think is the smart decision. But that does take us over here to our next pick here at the 17-1. And the 17-1 is going to be made by my guy, Caleb Niemi. So let's see who Caleb does select here at the 17-1.
What is poppin', guys? This is Caleb Niemi, and in round 17, I end up selecting Michael Wilson for this absolutely stacked team. We got wide receivers, we got running backs, we got quarterbacks, and really for me, there wasn't any massive correlations on the board, any stacks that I could get without really starting to reach. And Michael Wilson, I feel like, is severely underrated right now in underdog drafts. Main reason is I think clear wide receiver 2 next to Marvin Harrison Jr. on this Arizona Cardinals team. Kyler Murray, we've seen that elusiveness, we've seen that elite level fantasy football production. Marvin Harrison, of course, is going to eat, but Michael Wilson has been able to eat in that rookie year with 8.8 fantasy points per game, was the wide receiver 57. I know a lot of people are scared about Zay Jones. I am not, so I am selecting Michael Wilson for this team. Go subscribe to Andrew if you haven't, you've made it all the way through this video.
Hey, I appreciate you, Caleb, for telling people to subscribe. So, hey, if you've made it to this point in the video, why don't you subscribe, hit that like button. But look, I like the Michael Wilson pick. I think he's a player who has some big playability in a best ball format. If you can get those big spike weeks, I do like that out of Michael Wilson. Zay Jones, I know Caleb says he's not super worried. He worries me a little bit. Not enough that it makes me think that this is a bad pick, but you have Michael Wilson. Maybe a guy like Demario Douglas would have been another pick that we could have made on this board. But overall, Michael Wilson, solid pick here by Caleb, and that takes us around the turn where we really don't have any of these tight ends come off the board. Jatavian Sanders and Noah Gray, they're really the only ones that did, so that is hopefully going to leave us with one more tight end selection here, so I am going to be putting a lot of trust in the last pick here. He is batting cleanup. I do appreciate you for picking here in the 18th round. But let's go over to Mike at South Harmon Fantasy Football, and let's see if he can save us with a tight end selection.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy Mike, picking here at the 18-12 for representing South Harmon Fantasy Football. 18-12. I got tail end Charlie. But it is what it is. Last pick, last round. Oh, boy. Looking at the team, actually turned out pretty good. Pretty excited. Quarterbacks turned out fine. Running backs, wide receivers. One spot looks terrible. And that would be the tight ends. Which is great, though, because I say tight ends don't matter. Especially in half PPR. Who really gives a shit? But let's shore it up. Hunter Henry. Greg Dulcich. Woof. I'm going to go with a guy who's now reunited with his once offensive coordinator who drafted him when he came in the league. And maybe, aside from my boy Kirk Ferentz, the next tight end kingmaker, I'm going to go with Hayden Hurst, the most likely guy to lead that Chargers tight end room with receiving work. I know the concussions, the neck, whatever it is, scary. But if Hayden Hurst can put it together in LA, devoid of passing weapons, could we get a cheap steal here? Third tight end? He might turn out to be the best one. That's all I got. Good luck with this team. By the way, if we end up winning it all, Andrew, give me my cut, man. I'm going to need that money.
Yeah, man, look, Mike, if we win, I promise you, everybody who has helped with this video, they're going to be getting a cut of some of this cash. So you guys can hold me to that. Let's see if we win some money. Everybody gets a cut. Everybody eats over here. But look, you have the tight end U poster in the background. I knew I could trust you, Mike. You came in, you saved us, you got another tight end on the board. So that does give us the tight end room of Hunter Henry, Greg Dulcich, Hayden Hurst. It doesn't look sexy. It doesn't sound sexy, but it might just get the job done in this type of format. So that is our last selection here. But let's look at this team overall, man. You do have the running back room of Christian McCaffrey, David Montgomery, Jonathan Brooks, Austin Ekeler, MarShawn Lloyd, and Jaylen Wright. So a very high upside, very high production type of running back room. At least we think so going into the 2024 season. You look at the quarterbacks, Brock Purdy, Deshaun Watson, that should get the job done for this roster. And then another strong point of this roster, and probably the strongest point of this roster, is the wide receivers. Chris Olave, Mike Evans, T. Higgins, Amari Cooper, Jordan Addison, Adonai Mitchell, and Michael Wilson. Feel pretty solid about that one. And then the tight end room, obviously, like we said, Henry, Dulcich, Hurst. Could be better, but it might get the job done. So that is going to be the roster. And that is also going to be the video for you guys today. So this is a video that took a long time to kind of schedule, get this all figured out. So if you guys did enjoy the video, do me the favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and let me know how much you enjoyed it in the comments down below. Let me know what you think of this team in the comments down below. And again, one more time, thank you to everybody that was a part of this video. It was really fun. It was really fun to make. I think it's a very unique type of video in this space. So go follow all of these guys. I am going to link them in the description down below so you guys can find them. But we'll see you guys on the next video. Until then, peace out.